All right, we will call this meeting of the Water and Sewer Authority of Cabarrus County to order, March 21st, 2024. It looks like we have quorum. And Lynn is not going to be with us and Rob is not, but so we have 7, so we're good to go. First item on the agenda, we'll jump right in. And I believe Michael is remote with us.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear us?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good deal. All right, so we'll start with the master plan reports. Thomas, take it away.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, as you know, we've been working on the master plan for a while. I do have a presentation for you this evening, kind of a summary of the majority of the tasks that have been completed. Lee Campbell is here with Black and Veatch. He is our project manager on that project. This is essentially a condensed version of the presentation that we gave the member jurisdiction staff and Charlotte water folks early in February. I know some of you were there for that, so it'll be a condensed version of that. And as Lee goes through this, you know, be thinking about ways that you may want to present this to your member board or your boards, your councils. Additional information you'd want to see, information that they, you know, might not care to see so much to streamline it, that sort of thing, as this presentation could be adapted for that as well. So I'll let Lee take it away from here.
And to clarify that, we will be making presentations, WSACC and Black and Veatch to the member boards of the jurisdictions. So just be thinking
Yes.
if adjustments you may want to be made to this presentation or that you feel would be valuable to streamline that presentation.
Right. All right.
Thank you, Thomas. As Thomas introduced me, I am Lee Campbell. I'm with Black and Veatch. Some of you may have been expecting to see Mike Osborne here tonight. Mike is under the weather with the flu, so I am taking his place to just bring you guys up to speed as to where we are and what is remaining on the master plan project. So let's see. I've got control of this, right? Okay. Very good. So when we got started with the project, you know, we met with WSACC and wanted to understand the objectives of the project. Over on the left-hand side of this slide, you see what the objectives were that were laid out. Basically, you know, a well-documented and forward-looking master plan to stay ahead of system capacity limitations. I think that some of the verbiage that was used was maybe in the past, some things had been more reactive, and we definitely wanted to be forward-thinking and knowing that this is a growing area. The second bullet is a very big component of the overall project as well. It doesn't tie directly to the master plan as much, but is getting that discharge permit for an increase at Rocky River. And as we'll talk about further in, that particular task of the master plan will be the lagging task in the overall project. Third was a prioritization of recommended improvements. So once we you know, put together the flow and demand projections and all of that data, you know, in what order did things need to be tackled? So we know what the overall picture is, and then, you know, how do we take it one bite at a time and in what order? And then leveraging the system data into decision-making tools. And essentially what that is making this a dynamic master plan through the use of some dashboards and Power BI. And I've got a couple of examples toward the end of this presentation on that, but we hope that's going to turn out to be a very useful tool. We're close to wrapping those up. It's been a lot of coordination with the staff from WSACC. So in taking those objectives, we divided the project into 6 tasks, as you see on the right-hand side of the screen. Task 1, the existing system evaluation, was essentially we've looked at a lot of flow monitoring and then calibrating the hydraulic model so that we start with a good baseline. The future growth planning was a lot of meeting with the member jurisdictions and the staffs, a lot of the planning departments and engineering departments, and looking at how Cabarrus County in the service area is going to develop. Task 3 was the permitting for the Rocky River Regional Wastewater Treatment Plant. Task 4 was looking at the water resources analysis, basically looking at your water supply, what you have versus what you're going to need and where you can get that additional need. The system capacity assessments. So once we had finished task 2, looking at the growth planning and we're able to develop future sewer demands, we had to put that future flow into that calibrated model from task one to understand where bottlenecks might be and where improvements may be needed throughout the system. And then task 6 is what ties everything together. It's the actual development of the plan and the development of the dashboard. So that just gives you an idea of kind of what we started with as goals and how we've tackled the project along the way. So, the task 2 that you saw on the previous slide was the growth and the projections. So we worked with another team member, Stewart, their planning department, because they had done one of the previous updates to basically look at where and how the growth is going to happen in the service area and to be able to spread that growth spatially through the service area. So the Stewart land use modeling approach is shown on this slide here, looking at land supply. So what is either not developed or vacant, or also looking at what is obligated to developers. Future land use, looking at zoning plans and different things, understand, where might single family homes be coming, where might industry be coming, and understanding where those things fall in the system. Step 3 was the suitability analysis, looking at economic and environmental factors that go into how things may develop. And then 4 was the growth forecast, and the community viz model, which is a Campo tool, was utilized to create this. There was a lot of coordination with each member jurisdiction during this phase. Over on the right, you'll see there's a list, and that's listed as stakeholders because it does go beyond some of just the member jurisdictions. Charlotte Water obviously has some interest in the system, and they, are a stakeholder. Harris County, similar. But this is just some of the steps that we took. So in May of 2022, so that just shows the timeline that this project has been going on for almost 2 years. Had a stakeholder kickoff, making data requests with a look back report to understand some changes since the last updates to population projections and such. In June, there were individual meetings with each jurisdiction looking at land uses, current development, future concerns. And then the fall and winter, fall of 22 to winter of 23. So basically a year time span there. Getting more feedback from jurisdictions, meeting with planning departments, and really understanding all the developments that are coming. And then we have recently, end of last year, finalized that documentation. We did have meetings. We changed a little bit of the approach on that and met with each member jurisdiction actually here at the WSACC offices. That was in 2024, just to discuss a little bit of change, which was more front loading the growth a little bit versus what we had before. It didn't make drastic changes to the overall master plan, but we just wanted to put it in front of each member jurisdiction as to why we had taken that approach. Okay, so from all of the population and growth projections, we came up with forecasts for water usage and sewer demand. The screen here shows the water usage, and basically we're showing that by year 2050, the water demand throughout the system would be over 48 million gallons per day. And that's going to be a 19.7 MGD growth from where it is today. If I recall correctly, I'll get to my notes here on that. Yeah, 19.7. And that's in metered water usage. So that's what's going out to the customers. And you can see for years 2030, 2040, and 2050 in those right-hand columns from each member jurisdiction, what that water demand is expected to be. I know there's a lot of numbers on that slide.
What percent is non-revenue water today? And so as we continue to grow up this, should we assume that the non-revenue water is going to be linear to the same growth that you have here that is anticipated?
I would need to ask the modeler as to exactly how that was put in. I would hate to tell you incorrectly. I don't know if it is I don't think it would fully match linear to the growth with this. You know, some of the non-metered waters, things like at the plant and some other uses, and I wouldn't expect that to go up as much as the metered usage with the growth.
Or would we expect it to grow up greater because of some of the leaks of the I&I problems that we have could get worse rather than better unless
Well-
we have a program to repair and fix them along the way?
Yeah, you know.
I'm sorry if I'm.
No, that's fine. I'm just trying to word this correctly. The leakage in the water system, I mean, yes, it is pipes deteriorate and stuff. Yes, it could get worse. I don't know. It's hard to say, is that linear, is it exponential? How, you know, hard to predict exactly how that will go, but
I guess I was asking, is your interpretation, is your assumption for non-revenue water at the same rate that the assumption is for revenue water to grow?
right.
Is that what you're assuming as you go forward here?
And I'm looking to see, let me just look at these notes here to see if Katie had.
And it may be such a small point that it doesn't make any difference, so.
Well, I do think it's safe to say we didn't assume that we were gonna get a lot better at that. We stayed fairly conservative.
Right.
With the, or that was our instructions to to our engineer was to not take aggressive approaches on assumptions like that you're gonna drastically lower that number. I think it's safe to say we would hope to, as water gets more and more expensive and water gets more and more scarce, that you potentially could,
Yeah.
but we didn't assume that
And-
would happen.
And it does say that we used a scaling factor in looking at non-metered water usage. I don't have it in these slides as to what that scaling factor was.
And the reason I'm looking at that is I look at a history of the system that I'm running, not this system, but another system. And the older the system gets, the worse that the non-revenue water is as a percentage. So I'm asking, how did you make that determination? And maybe this is such a small percentage, we can leave that to a discussion some other time.
Yeah, I mean, in the grand scheme of your non-metered versus your metered, it would certainly be a small percentage, and thanks, Thomas, for pointing out. The middle column here in that is the scaling factors that was used for each member jurisdiction, so it's in that 1.3 to 1.445 range for Mount Pleasant there.
Do you
I
know
think-
if you looked at produced water or you looked at sold water?
That both, I believe, yeah,
That's how the scaling factor
Yeah.
came in,
that's right.
was comparing the two.
Yeah, the scaling factor comes in and comparing the two, Michael.
Okay.
Anything else on this slide? Okay. And then following the water usage projections, we look at the sewer flow forecast. And as you can see, basically by 2050, we expect Rocky River to be a little over 40 MGD, 40.13, and the Muddy Creek wastewater plant to be seeing 0.73 MGD. And similar to the previous slide, we're showing the different member jurisdictions and the flows that are going to happen over time, 2030, 2040, and 2050, with the base year essentially being what you have now. And I'll talk about this on the next slide, but the speculative limits west for 40 MGD and 50 MGD, you know, this 40.86 that we're expecting to see in 25 years ties directly to that.
I'm curious,
Yes, sir.
how did you consider the compression factor that we've had in the last few years? That is because we haven't had enough capacity. We've had people sitting on the sidelines that we couldn't permit or whatever. That as soon as we get the additional capacity, that rate is going to increase fairly significantly. So I'm sort of curious as to how you figured that compression versus what that's going to change in the rate as we go past and we get new capacity there.
Mhm. So we do have the growth. I think this will answer what you're asking. The growth is more front loaded, so more of the growth will happen between like now and 2030 than it will like from 2030 going forward. And then, you know, we were receiving input from each member jurisdiction for developments and pending developments, and I'm sure that we're, you know, requests that had been made were brought forth to us in that. So that would be the way it was accounted for.
Yeah, so flow accepted, but hasn't been connected yet. Developer control capacity was obviously factored in. But then also those lists that each jurisdiction has and maintained of kind of those projects in the pipeline. Black and Veatch worked directly with each jurisdiction to establish those and identify those. And almost all of that was included in the prior to 2030 range. So that's where I think he made that comment earlier about front loading.
Yeah.
Some of it, we took, instead of linearly spreading the growth out over the 50 year or to 2050, we front loaded that first
Slow.
6-8 years and then kind of sloped it out. And it still got to the same point. We just jumped a little faster and then got out to the same point.
And I just switched slides if anybody, while Chad was finishing there, and this slide kind of shows some of that. So the kind of yellowish line, Thomas, did you say this is not exactly a pointer, but it, there we go. Okay, so this line here shows the expected growth in flow at this is for Rocky River specifically. So you can see that we're at the left side, you know, in year 2023, we're just over 20 MGD, and that line is steeper up through year 2030 and then starts to flatten out a little bit. And the blue line that you can see, kind of the top line, that shows the capacity of the plant. So currently you're working toward, you know, this phase 3 expansion to 30 MGD, that's underway. Phase 4 to 34 is also underway. These show the completion dates. So phase 3 should be done in 2024. Phase 4 is 2027. The lines underneath the blue line, so the dashed lines there represent 80 and 90% of that rated capacity. And where that's important is the 80-90 rule that the state has, that when you are seeing average flows of 80% of your capacity, you should be planning for an expansion. When you get to 90% of that capacity, you should be under construction for you should have permits in hand, authorization to construct for another expansion. So, you know, where this yellowish line, that represents the expected flow, when it starts to approach those 80 and 90% lines, that's when actions have to be taken for planning and construction of the plant. Any questions there? But the fact that line is steeper up to year 2030, I think, addresses some of that question about the compression issue. Showing that growth. And when we get further down the road, if it's determined that, you know, maybe 40 MGD is not what's needed, maybe it's 38 MGD, you know, when we get to that point, then the way the spec limits will come in, that could be adjusted down, you know, for interim flows if it's determined that's the best move to make at that time. Anything else here? And the next one is the same type slide, and it's just related to the Muddy Creek wastewater plant. So currently Muddy Creek is at a little less than 200,000 gallons per day, and this shows the growth for the Muddy Creek Basin and the expansions. We show 0.6 MGD in like 2027, and then expansion to 1 late in the 2030s. And this one is probably a little more variable, you might say, than the Rocky River plant. But that's what the projections are showing currently.
What's permitted capacity at Muddy Creek right now?
300,000 gallons a day.
There is a discharge permit for one.
Yes,
1 million,
so
yeah.
we have a discharge permit for 1 million gallons per day. We could do something similar where we could ask the state for a discharge permit for an interim amount somewhere between where we are now at 300,000 and 1 million. So this is not saying that we have to expand in these increments, but we do have that permit all the way to 1 MGD right now.
But when we did the last upgrade at Muddy Creek, it was 150, right?
Yes, so 150.
The way I remember it being explained to me, it's kind of like a train car. You just add another train car. So is that the plan going forward with Muddy Creek, or It seems to me I've heard something about actual new construction at Muddy Creek.
There's quite a few variables that could impact how that's addressed and move forward. It could be that simple. It could be, a little more concrete, instead of more steel. That's part of what the facilities plan that we're working on right now is gonna be analyzing of what level of expansion do we want to go to and how do we want to expand that. So.
So moving ahead, looking, the next slide here represents the water supply. Similar deal with the 80 and 90 rule for, that we just discussed for, hit the button, didn't mean to do that, apologies. Now I'm going the wrong way. Sorry about that. The 80 and 90 rule that when you reach 80% of your 50-year safe yield, you should be planning, and 90% you should have plans in place either for alternative supplies or for construction if you're, looking at reservoirs and things of that nature. The 50-year drought is the planning long-term water supply planning marker that the state uses. Let's see. The green line, I hit the wrong button. The green line here represents that 80% of the 50-year safe yield. The two lines here, the average annual demand is the darker blue line, and then the lower line is kind of what's expected under drought management protocols, the LIP demand low impact protocol. That you might have in a drought response plan. Couple of things here. The Second Creek rehab intake was rehabbed during the time of this report. And then the other major thing that we looked at is infrastructure improvements for the Yadkin IBT, and I think there are plans underway currently looking at some of that.
But it assumes the full 10 million from Albemarle, is that right?
For the Yadkin.
From the Yadkin PD.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
But the infrastructure is not in place currently to move NMGD is my understanding.
Correct.
So that's what the planning is I think you can move like 5 now.
The line's big enough, but this water plant doesn't have enough capacity to send us 10 million. Okay.
Explain operational yield versus safe yield.
The operational yield is essentially what you could get if all the infrastructure was in place. The safe yield take that back. Safe yield is what you could get. Operational is what you're limited by your infrastructure. Okay, and so then, getting more into, I guess, the meat of the actual CIP. This is just a quick overview at projects that were identified. So after we looked at all these new sewer flows and input that into the hydraulic model that had been calibrated and looked for the pinch points in the system, the capacity driven projects, we came up with 23 different projects that total $300 million between now and year 2050. As you can see, 15 gravity sewer projects, which will get rid of 1 pump station, 3 force main projects, and 5 pump station capacity increases. And one of those includes a force main replacement. For the wastewater treatment plant expansions, we've talked about that previously with Rocky River undergoing phase 3 and 4 currently. And then phase 5, essentially the planning for that will start as phase 4 is wrapping up. Muddy Creek, we mentioned earlier, has the discharge permit to go up to 1 million gallons. It's currently rated for 300,000 as far as its authorization to operate. And there will probably be interim incremental upgrades to Muddy Creek along the way. Condition driven projects, there were a few projects that were identified at Rocky River that are not part of any of the current expansion projects. For example, the centrifuges, the burners in the incinerator, switching those over to natural gas. So just some more condition related projects that weren't capacity driven and just aren't being addressed. And those total to $11 million. So not insignificant, but smaller in the grand scheme of everything. Any questions here? And then, as we mentioned, one of the goals was to have a dynamic CIP that, didn't just live totally in a 3-ring binder on the shelf, and that's where the use of the dashboard tools comes in. So 3 dashboards are being developed, have been developed, and are being tweaked at this point, I would say. And these will take the data that, the member jurisdictions basically give data to WSACC twice a year, I believe, is my understanding. And set that down, so I'll keep hitting the button. But anyway, the 3 major dashboards that we developed are shown kind of around this continuum here. The first one being the obligated flows dashboard. So it shows where development is coming, where flows have been obligated, and the developer controlled flows or developer controlled capacity. The jurisdictional flow monitoring shows that real-time flow monitoring information so that we can understand when trigger criteria are met, when the trigger criteria from the ICIP dashboard that basically says, okay, if this line gets to a certain amount of flow, that's triggering a project. You've reached, let's just say 80% of the capacity of that line, and we know more flow is coming. So we need to be thinking about and planning for upgrades to that particular facility. So the next 3 slides are just a quick screenshot of each one of those dashboards. Obligated flows dashboard is the one that's shown here, and you can see on the right-hand side, it's just some graphs that show the developer control capacity and the housing units, the different types of housing units and where they're located as far as which member jurisdiction. You can click, I believe, on individual projects on the left. And Thomas, you've had more with the functionality of this than I have to date. And be able to pull up projects and understand what's coming to a particular parcel. And then the jurisdictional flow monitoring dashboard shows the actual flow monitoring. And then if you look on the upper right, the facility capacity analysis, that actually has the obligated flow in gray, and then the average flow at different facilities in the system. And again, WSACC will use this one to better understand when you're tracking toward the trigger criteria that are in the ICIP dashboard. This one has basically each one of those projects that we mentioned earlier, the 23 collection system projects are input into this. And adjustments can be made, adjustments to cost, but you can also see the project triggers. So for instance, down at the bottom there, it's showing, average flow. This one is Coldwater Creek. And basically lets you know when you reach this level, this project needs to be a plan put into place for it. And so these different dashboards all kind of tie together in that way. We're still working through finishing these. We're getting very close. In fact, the update I got today is, Thomas, I know we're working through the peaking factors, and that's our last hurdle, is just to coordinate that, and we'll be complete.
Is there a screen somewhere in one of these dashboards that will allow us to look at the prioritization of those pinch points and the projects that are required to eliminate those pinch points? All of them are not going to occur the same year. All of them are going to be coming at a variety of times. So is there a place somewhere that we can say, okay, here are the 19 projects that need to be finished, whatever that number is. And this one is first priority, third, second, third, fourth. so that we can sort of see how it might affect us, each one of us along the way? Is there something like that somewhere?
So in the same dashboard, this is zooming in on a particular project
Right,
within the
that's what I-
CIP dashboard. The CIP dashboard also has charts that show projects over time as they are currently projected. So you can look at dollar value per year. You can look at which projects occur or are expected to occur in which year, and that sort of thing. And then you can drill into it like this one, and you can look at trigger criteria to say, okay, we think that one, based on the initial analysis was 2034. But what is the trigger criteria and where are we now using those other dashboard tools against that?
I guess what I was thinking about is each of us in our communities might see changes to what we anticipated that was going to happen. And as a result of that, we could then say, well, this project needs to be sped up, or this one doesn't need to take place as fast as we thought it was going to take place because our growth has not been as quick as we thought it was going to be. And at least it would give us some clue. And as we relate that to WSAC along the way, that those priorities may shift as we work through it.
Yes, sir. And on the jurisdiction flow monitoring dashboard, these dashboards have many more tabs than you're seeing this evening. But on the jurisdiction flow monitoring dashboard, that is pulling the actual flow meter data that we get from CHA every month. That's loading that data in, and then it's pulling our obligated flow data in as well from our flow acceptance spreadsheets. And we can also look at that with member jurisdiction staff as well to say, okay, if you think this big project's coming in over here, let's add that to those things that we already have in the dashboard and see where we are versus that capacity overall.
I know these are just examples. Can you go back one slide? So when you talk about these pinch points or triggers, I'm looking at the Lower Rocky River Pump Station, and it looks like it already passed the trigger.
Sure, that was relative. This is a small snapshot in time for one thing. That was relative to the, we are upgrading that pump station right now. We've now got the 6 pumps in. So this was relative to the 4 pump scenario. So what they've done, they've built these dashboards. We will bring them over to our computer system. We will enter more updated data into them as we make that transition. They will pull automatically from our data.
Okay.
So these are examples, of that, but.
And I think the best thing it's gonna do for WSAC first, so for example, let's take 3 Mile Branch interceptor, okay? If that interceptor, we know that if flow gets to a certain level, we may have a problem. Well, in the past, we would have to go out and go to the metering data on a month-by-month basis and pull that up and try to find out what that peak was and what that average flow was to look and see where we are. Then if we're looking at flow acceptance, we'd have to go through a spreadsheet and try to identify, is that subdivision in this basin or is it not? Well, now we can go on GIS and see where all the subdivisions are and see what may or may not fall in that subdivision. We can plug in a new development and see where it falls. If it falls in that in that drainage basin, we can pull up this spreadsheet and look at what flow is that's been pulled together. So it just brings everything where, as an engineer, you can jump through 2 or 3 dashboards and reprioritize your CIP instead of having to do a very in-depth dive into data. But it does not look at your updated metering data and reorganize your CIP for you. You'll still have to manually do that, but it makes the data much more useful.
Anything else on the dashboards? Those are the, as Thomas mentioned, these are just snapshots and there's a lot of screens associated with these. But the cool thing is I think it's going to replace the Excel based transportation model that they've had and just make it a little smoother for the staff. Okay. So this is really my last slide. The action items, as Thomas and Chad mentioned earlier about the communication to the member jurisdiction boards, and they may come up and talk more about that, or you guys will provide them direction on how to communicate a similar message to those boards. Items remaining, so I mentioned early on that the permitting for the expansion of Rocky River would lag behind. So where we are on that, we actually had a call with Thomas and with another sub consultant of ours today, Tetra Tech. So Tetra Tech is a firm that did all the water quality modeling of Rocky River, and this was a significant effort. I mean, they've modeled 95 miles of Rocky River because there was not an up-to-date model, and that's not just for the benefit of WSAC. I mean, it's every discharge in that basin. So, you know, Charlotte Water with Mallard will be using it, Albemarle, Union County, and I'm sure there's countless others out there that I'm not mentioning, but several. So they completed the model, they calibrated the model. They have now run that model, basically showing Rocky River with discharges of 40, 50 MGD, and they're going to submit that with a memo to the state, and we hope that goes in next week. So the plan that we discussed today is Tetra Tech's going to send the memo. The staff, WSAC staff, had a few comments on the memo. They are addressing those. WSAC is actually going to directly submit to the state so that it comes from WSAC on their letterhead. Tetra Tech should send the revised memo tomorrow, and along with basically some sample language to include in the cover letter so that we make sure we are thorough with the submission to the state. Tetra Tech said the state asked for a minimum of 30 days. They said more recently they have seen 60 days to get a good reply back. You know, we don't know if it'll come back with the spec limits or it'll come back with comments and questions. It's just hard to know. I'd somewhat be surprised if they don't come back with some comments and questions, because this is just a complicated thing here and impacts a lot of different utilities. Once we do have the spec limits, though, we will complete the engineering alternatives analysis, which looks at the different options to make sure we're meeting the treatment levels that are required. We also have to show our population projections and why we requested 40 and 50. You can't just go in and, you know, ask for anything that you want. You have to have justification behind those numbers. There will be an environmental document required, and then once everything, the engineering alternatives analysis and the SEPA environmental document are approved, we can submit the actual application for the discharge. I expect this process to maybe be another 24 months. I mean, I wish I could say quicker, but that's just the reality of it. And then, as we mentioned earlier, the final bullet there, finalizing the dashboards and master plan, we've submitted drafts of both of those. We've been working with Thomas and staff to get a few corrections made in the master plan report, and we're working with Thomas on one piece of data on some of our peaking factors in the dashboards, and we'll get that wrapped up in the next few days and have those documents submitted very soon.
Alrighty.
So we've talked about these speculative limits before, and maybe you can help me remember what our conversation was, but it had something to do with the oxygen after discharge. And I tied that to the hydraulic modeling of the Rocky River.
Correct.
So we still do not have those? Is that correct? Is that what I just heard you say?
We do
No,
not.
we're still trying to get the speculative limits? And that comes from the state, or is that?
From the state.
So when we submit this application to the state for approval for discharge, we put a request number, do we not?
Yeah.
And our request number is 40 to 50?
Yes.
It's 40
And 50, yeah, not, yes, 40 and.
So we will have a speculative limit page for our numbers for 40 million gallons a day discharge and speculative limits for 50 million gallon a day discharge.
So historically, I know we had the capacity up to 34,
Yes.
even though our plant was way too small to handle that much capacity. Did we get that discharge permit at the same time that that we had the one that we operate off of?
No, that permit was actually received in the late 90s. Is that correct? In the late 90s, as the plant was closer to capacity at that time. So that permit was in hand. We were very lucky to have that permit in hand when we did, to not have to go through any permitting exercises at that time. And that's what we're wanting to make sure that we're back in that position, that we have the permit. Also, it should be noted, the speculative limit is the key piece of data that the engineer needs to begin looking at designing what the expansion is gonna be.
That's right.
So it's, the 2 years is kind of the data to get the final permit in hand to have the permit, but the speculative limits is anticipated to be much sooner than
Yes,
that, in the
yes.
next 3 months or
Yeah,
so.
right.
Is anticipated in that. That is the data that our engineer needs to begin looking at what the design would look like. or
We
the-
gotta know what we're designing against, you
Yeah.
know, what can we discharge and so
Yeah.
how much treatment, what level of treatment.
So the 24 months is not when we start. We can run those simultaneously together. Okay,
Yeah, yeah.
that makes me feel
I'm
a
sorry.
lot better. Thank you for taking it down, and I was like, I can tell you what you want to leave out of the presentation is that back right there. So
We will clarify that for sure.
very good. Yeah.
And the wastewater treatment facilities plan is already in process. It will incorporate as it goes, the speculative limits we get here, as they're doing their conceptual design, for Rocky River.
Since we're likely to get numbers torqued downward from the state rather than upward from the state, should we be asking for 55 and 50 rather than 40 to 50? So that we wind up as close to 50 as possible based on our numbers. I realize if the numbers don't justify it, there's no way you could go. So should we be stretching, I guess, is the request as much as we possibly can?
I think it's more of a case of not that the 40 and the 50 is gonna be an issue. It's gonna be if we want a 3 milligram per liter discharge on ammonia, they're gonna want 1.5.
Right.
We're not gonna get the 30. It's not so much the 40 MGD or the 50 MGD.
Yeah.
And I do think it would be tough for us to go right now with a plan out to 2050 that only goes to like around 41 million gallons a day to request above 50. Would be tough to get the state to go along with. Now, we obviously don't want to get to a point to where we're flowing 40 MGD and we haven't looked beyond 50. So we'll be in another position 10, 15 years from now with another master plan update or 2 from now of looking at future discharge permits at that time.
I guess I was thinking to myself that if we can only get 6 more on top of the 34 that we have here to take us up to 40, that 6 is going to be pretty expensive compared to if we could get 15 instead of just 6. The chances are our cost to get the extra 15 is going to be less per million gallons than it would be just to get to 6. I guess I'm saying. So maybe I'm out to lunch, but I was just thinking we should ask for more than they.
Well, there's logistics of expansion too that had to be considered too. You may not be able to build 4. Maybe you can go to 6 and you've maxed out your site and that's your number, right?
I agree.
So I think you've got some flexibility built in, but we really don't know what those increments practically are.
Correct, correct. And once you have the limits for 50, then going to 42 or going to 44 is much easier as long as you agree to meet the limits that are established at 50. So it really just gives you dots on the map, basically, that you know that you have to be at. And if you're willing to meet those tighter, because as our flow goes up, our discharge concentrations are going to go down. They're going to get tighter, and we know that. And if you're willing to meet those earlier, you can get those permit pages.
Other questions for Lee or?
My only comment, Thomas, to your point on anything we'd like to tweak for the elected officials. I mean, I do think maybe some additional information on that 2008 drought and the safe field results of that is really important. Because, we went through the IBT and that was supposed to get us to a really long planning horizon, and then boom, we lost millions of gallons overnight. So I think that does tell a little bit. It may just be that existing slide, but just some comments about what that really looked like, because that's a big deal.
Yes, I think a snapshot look at our safe yield data
Yep.
historically
I think
in
that'd
the
be helpful.
county we can do that for sure.
Any other questions? All right.
Thank you for
Thanks,
asking.
Lee. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
Thomas, Chad, good job. All right, we will roll on. Got some minutes from February 15th. Do I hear a motion to approve? Your second?
Second.
Any discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, those minutes are adopted, approved. All right, Michael. We'll
Get-
turn it over to you for discussion of the budget.
All right, Thomas, could you roll it up to, I guess, page 1, on up? Where the, budget message starts. I'm not gonna read the budget message, but, in the first page, I mentioned there are 2 main items impacting the budget. Well, there's 2 main items impacting the budget that we have control over. One of the other ones we don't have control over. The 2 that we have control over is the new debt and debt service that we have. And the other one is the cost of the salary study and merit increase for employees is the 2 things that we actually have control over. The third thing that we don't have control over is the city or Charlotte Water is diverting part of their flow to a new pump station to be treated in Mecklenburg County to free up some capacity for some other developments that will be coming to Rocky River in the future. So actually our flow will drop from 7.45 billion gallons to 6.98 billion gallons. Right now is our projection. That's 180 million gallons of flow that we received last year that we tentatively won't receive next year. Just so you have an idea of that amount, that is 2.5 times the size or the contribution from Mount Pleasant. I am recommending a 4.3% increase in the rate, going to $1.842 per thousand. That would be about 38 cents per month for a 5,000 gallon residential unit. Also, as another reference, if we were still receiving the 180 million gallons from Charlotte, we would get by with a 1.64% increase. The major things I mentioned before are salaries and benefits. Next page. There you go, operating. I'm recommending a 5% merit increase for employees based on the performance evaluation. As you can see, the salary and benefits comes up to about $275,000. We are also looking at, or we are in the middle of having a salary study done. We hope to have it completed by April, ready for the board. It may be May, but our goal is to have it ready in April. I've plugged in 400,000 for that. That was an early estimate from our contractor on this. And I have had requests for 2 new positions. We haven't added positions in several years. I had 2, one for a utility systems engineer and one for an EHS compliance technician. I decided to budget those for the last half of the year and give the new executive director time to evaluate that after he or she did whatever they needed to do with restructuring the organization, and whether they chose to fill those or not. Again, the retirement system's increasing the employer retirement contribution to 13.6%, and that's $41,000. Another big item that's new to us down under contract services is we are going to have to start testing for PFAS. That's the forever chemicals that you hear about on the news every day. We were selected by EPA as one of the top 400 largest treatment plants in the U.S., and we will have to start doing PFAS testing. We hope it doesn't lead to us having to treat for PFAS, but I see that where we're headed. Again, fixed charges and debt service. On the next page, we have a net increase of 3,638,833. You'll see the breakdown increase to each one of the jurisdictions. Some of you will know why Charlotte Water is going down. They are not participating in the debt that we just issued. They're contributing cash, and we are in the process of paying off several of our SRF loans. So they participated in those. And as we pay them off, their debt service or fixed charges drop. So just wanted to mention that in case there was any concern about that. Let's see. Following that, can I just get you to scroll to page 13? Thomas, I'll let you go through these things at your own pleasure, but I want to point out a few things that I find most interesting in here. That's it. This is our actual flows and our budget flows, and you'll see from the year 2000 through 23, our flows and our budgeted flows are remaining in a real tight, narrow band. We're not seeing a lot of growth in flows. We do see peak months, but on a year-to-year basis, we're just not seeing. We're still running about 20 MGD on a yearly average. So just mentioning that. I could get you to scroll down to page 20. And this is the calculation from prior year to the current year of your fixed charges and your variable charges. The 24-25 year, if you'll look down at the bottom under budgeted flow, MGs per calendar year, you'll see that Mount Pleasant increased its flow by 5 million. Harrisburg about 30 million. Charlotte Water went down, and Kannapolis also went up. That's part of the reason their variable charges are different between each one of you, but it applies the calculation is still the same, but some of you will see a bigger increase just based on budgeted flows. But since we bill based on actual, this is just our estimate. And then the pages that follow, I'll just mention, are the detail for each jurisdiction. If you the booklet I sent out today by email, each jurisdiction has a page in here that shows your actual charges or your actual fixed charges and your estimated variable charges for the year. And just to mention, in 2 years, the first principal payment will be due on the new debt, and that will be an additional $2,070,000. So looking forward, that is coming up. And with that, I'll answer questions or go into more detail or about whatever the board wants.
Michael, just to clarify, we'll have an interest payment only this year and interest payment only following year. 25 and 26 and 27 will be our first full payment.
Right. 2 years. 2 years interest only.
Other questions for Michael?
So by the time that first principal payment comes around on the new debt, it seems to me, I remember seeing slides prior to or maybe prior years where our existing debt will be practically paid off. So all of the debt will be new debt. Is that correct? Or-
That's correct. The majority of it was paid off in the last 2 or 3 years. And that helped offset some of the new debt we had on the original issue, so we didn't have to raise fixed charges as much. But with this new debt, our outstanding debt on the SRF loans is very small. It's only a few $100,000.
Maybe a question for Robin, but obviously with the retirement system, that's a falls into your category of things we have no control over. But what about health insurance? Or I didn't see anything. Hopeful, I guess health insurance held relatively steady.
It has for the past several years. We have got some preliminary numbers and we're looking at 7% this year. I think we budgeted 5, Michael, is that correct?
That's correct.
We are hoping to work with Blue Cross Blue Shield because they have asked us not to shop our insurance this year. So hopefully they're going to give us some administrative credits and that's going to help us with that percentage. And that's what we're looking for. We've been dealing with the broker, but we won't have those numbers until 2 weeks from now. So we're hoping that he can bring it down to that 5% number. In the past, we've had some reserve there, so we think we'll be okay.
Thank you.
Other questions?
And Michael, as far as the recommendation on putting on the two new positions, as I recall, over the past several years, we've done nothing but cut positions. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. We've eliminated maybe 4 positions in administrative office in the last few years. We kind of held it steady down at the plant, but we've cut positions in administrative services.
The additions that we have in the budget with the demand of what we have going on, and if PFAP comes into play, and we're certain that it will, right, Mark? We really need that. We'll need that technician to handle more there, just because we don't have but one technician at this point in time, and then the engineer, of course. You know what we've got coming there, so we definitely need another utility system engineer. Because our utility system engineer now is part-time.
Any other questions?
We need a motion to set the public hearing.
Well, first, I want to see if we want to have any budget work sessions. If I need to provide any more information.
Budget doesn't look too complex to me. I'm not sure we need one, but anybody disagree with that?
I'm okay with it. It's straightforward.
And I would entertain a motion to set the public hearing for April 18th, 2024.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Motion a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Motion carries. Thank you, Michael and staff. Good job as always.
Thank you. Thanks, staff.
Okay, we will move on. Chad, going to talk about the Cottle Creek bid award.
Yes. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, we turned out to have very good timing on our bidding of this project, it appears. The Cottle Creek, Lower Cottle Creek Parallel Project consists of about 28,000 feet of 48-inch, primarily a little bit of 36-inch gravity sewer, and that's paralleling our existing 30-inch Cottle Creek interceptor. This interceptor serves everything, including the grounds at Concord area up by Franklin Park on up into Afton Village, and up into areas, flow coming out of areas of Kannapolis. So has a very actively growing basin with lots of new construction going on in that area, not to mention some potential large projects in that area. We were lucky to get 6 bids for the project. There was a lot more interest even beyond those 6 bids. It turns out we hit it at a time where the market for large projects in Charlotte was pretty lacking, with Charlotte Water kind of putting some projects on hold and delaying some projects. And then also for our low bidder, RH Price, having a very large design build project that they thought they were going to get fall apart and not happen a few weeks before this bid took place. So we ended up with 3 local contractors that do a lot of work in our area, RH Price, BRS, and Sanders, all giving very aggressive bids on this project. The engineer's cost estimate for the bidded portion of this project was about 39 million and some change. So to come in over $11 million, over 30% under budget, it was a very good result for us, obviously. As a reminder, this project is being funded with state grant money that we had there. So with that, we have some money that's not going to be utilized by this project that we are looking at another project of moving that forward, and that will probably be something the board will be seeing very soon. So it's going to allow us to get another CIP project done with state money. So that's a win-win for us for sure. Gavilan Dorn and WSACC staff have completed a canvas of the low bid by RH Price, including talking with multiple owners and engineers as references. And it is the recommendation of both Gavilan Dorn and of WSACC to award the contract for the installation of the Cottle Creek Parallel to RH Price. So we have been asked because of the requirements of the American Rescue Plan Act funds. There's a resolution that's attached that needs to be approved to go along with that documentation for requesting those funds. So I would ask the board to approve the award and the resolution, the attached resolution for the bid on the Cottle Creek project. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Chad? And do I hear a motion?
Make a motion to approve the low bid and adopt the resolution.
Motion, hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That motion carries.
And when would the project start if everything goes well?
Jason?
Get this out, get approval from the state, I'd say a couple months.
By summer, there should be work taking place on the ground.
I read somewhere it's 24 months.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, next one's yours as well. Construction phase services.
Yes, so we would like to recommend us to select Gavilan Dorn to do the construction admin portion of this project. They have extensive history of doing that with lots of jurisdictions in our area. They did do the design of the project and handle the bidding, so they're very familiar with the project and have lots of experience. If I'm correct, they did the construction inspection for the water line project from Albemarle, correct? I believe.
A lot more, so.
Yes, so I've worked in our area quite a bit. They work well with our staff. We do have this as a task for time and material fee of a little over $2 million. That would be a high estimate, I believe. Depends on our contractor and how smoothly things go, but they will be billing us on a time and material basis. The contractor has expressed a desire to run 2 crews. So this estimate does include having 2 inspectors on site as necessary to move through the project quickly. Jason Dorn with Gavilan Dorn Engineering is here. If you have any questions about their services and what services they'll be providing, he would be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Chad or Jason?
For approval.
I got a motion to approve the scope of services and fees.
Second.
Okay, got a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right. Wendy.
We were fortunate enough to receive an additional 7.125 million in ARPA funds, so it just gives us a total of $42,125,000. As Chad just said, we're gonna use that for Lower Cottle Creek. The first allocation to take care of Lower Cottle Creek, and as he said, we're looking for projects to apply this 7.125 million to. So to accept this, we need the resolution of acceptance as part of the ARPA plan or the ARPA dollars necessary documents. And it also appoints me as the authorized representative. That's that you I guess resolution to accept the resolution.
I do, any questions for Wendy? I hear a motion to accept the ARPA Act resolution. Resolution to accept. Second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. All right, Robin, you're next. We're gonna talk about reclassification policies.
I would like to update the language in the section 3.7 reclassifications. This language just gives us a little bit more leeway and the ability to implement policies as far as reclassification is concerned. So what that language is going to go to, you see in red where we've strike the language out that's there. We would like to say generally when the pay classification structure is adjusted or a position is reclassified, individual employee pay will be determined by a combination of performance, time in the specific position. That is the only change to this section in the personnel policy. I would ask the board for approval for that to be effective March 21st, 2024.
Or you're just eliminating the 30% maximum?
Yes, really, because it creates an issue and understanding. So to apply the policy or whatever the study comes in at, it's based on board approval of the study. It's based on where the consultant said we need to place this person or this position, not person, but this position. And it just makes it a little difficult, and it's old language as well.
Makes sense. Any questions for Robin on this change?
Move to approve the updated language.
Okay, motion, second,
Second.
any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. All right, Michael, we've got interjurisdictional pre-treatment agreements.
Well, it's been a long time in circulating this through all the jurisdictions, but we finally have them all signed and returned, and I'm asking for permission to execute those on behalf of WSACC.
Straightforward.
So moved.
I've got a motion. Second, any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, that motion carries.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up for any public comments. Anybody in the audience which to speak to the board? Okay, hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to go into closed session under GS 143, 318, 11, A1, A3, and A6. Second, any